Captain George Vancouver was an English officer of the Royal Navy, best known for his 1791–95 expedition, which explored and charted North America's northwestern Pacific coast regions, including the coasts of contemporary Alaska, British Columbia, Washington and Oregon. He also explored the Hawaiian Islands and the southwest coast of Australia. In Canada, Vancouver Island and the city Vancouver are named after him, as of Vancouver, Washington in the United States, Mount Vancouver on the Yukon-Alaska border and New Zealand's sixth highest mountain. Early life and career. George Vancouver was born in Kings Lynn on the 22nd of June 1757 as the sixth and youngest child of John Jasper Vancouver, a deputy collector of customs, and Bridget Berners. In 1771, at the age of 13, George Vancouver entered the Royal Navy as a young gentleman, a future candidate for midshipman. He was selected to serve as a midshipman aboard HMS Resolution on James Cook's second voyage searching for Terra Australis. He also accompanied Cook's third voyage, this time aboard Resolution's sister ship Discovery, and was present during the first European sighting and exploration of the Hawaiian Islands. Upon his return to Britain in October 1780, Vancouver was commissioned as a lieutenant and posted aboard the sloop Martin, initially on escort and patrol duty in the English Channel and North Sea. He accompanied the ship when it left Plymouth on the 11th of February 1782 for the West Indies. On the 7th of May 1782, he was appointed 4th Lieutenant of the HMS Fame, which was at the time part of the British West Indies Fleet and assigned to patrolling the French-held Leeward Islands. Vancouver returned to England in June 1783. In the late 1780s, the Spanish Empire commissioned an expedition to the Pacific Northwest. However, the 1789 Nootka crisis intervened. Spain and Britain came close to war over ownership of the Nootka Sound on contemporary Vancouver Island, and of greater importance, the right to colonize and settle the Pacific Northwest coast. Henry Robertson Vancouver joined Britain's more warlike vessels. Vancouver went with Joseph Whitby to HMS Carajou. When the First Nootka Convention ended the crisis in 1790, Vancouver was given command of Discovery to take possession of Nootka Sound and to survey the coasts. Explorations. Vancouver expedition departing England with 2 ships on the 1st of April 1791. Vancouver commanded an expedition charged with exploring the Pacific region. In its first year, the expedition traveled to Cape Town, Australia, New Zealand, Tahiti, and Hawaii, collecting botanical samples and surveying coastlines along the way. He formally claimed at Possession Point, King George Sound, Western Australia, now the town of Albany, Western Australia for the British. Proceeding to North America, Vancouver followed the coasts of present-day Oregon and Washington northward. In April 1792, he encountered American Captain Robert Gray off the coast of Oregon just prior to Gray's sailing up the Columbia River. Vancouver entered the Strait of Juan de Fuca, between Vancouver Island and the Washington state mainland, on the 29th of April 1792. His orders included a survey of every inlet and outlet on the west coast of the mainland, all the way north to Alaska. Most of this work was in small craft propelled by both sail and oar. Maneuvering larger sail-powered vessels in uncharted waters was generally impractical and dangerous. Vancouver named many features after friends and associates, including Mount Baker, after 3rd Lieutenant Joseph Baker, the first on the expedition to spot it. Mount St. Helens, after Aline Fitzherbert, 1st Baron St. Helens. Puget Sound, after Discovery's Lieutenant Peter Puget, who explored its southern reaches. Mount Rainier, after his friend, Rear Admiral Peter Rainier. Discovery Bay, Discovery Island and Port Discovery. Vancouver was the second European to enter Burrard Inlet on 13 June 1792, naming it after his friend Sir Harry Burrard. It is the present-day main harbour area of the city of Vancouver beyond Stanley Park. George Vancouver surveyed Howe Sound and Jervis Inlet over the next 9 days. Then, on his 35th birthday on the 22nd of June 1792, he returned to Point Grey, the present-day location of the University of British Columbia. Here he unexpectedly met a Spanish expedition led by Dionisio Alcala Galiano and Cayetano Valde y Flores. Vancouver was mortified to learn they already had a crude chart of the Strait of Georgia based on the 1791 exploratory voyage of José María Narváez the year before, under command of Francisco de Eliza. For 3 weeks they cooperatively explored the Georgia Strait and the Discovery Islands area before sailing separately towards Nootka Sound. After the summer surveying season ended in August 1792, Vancouver went to Nootka, then the region's most important harbour, on contemporary Vancouver Island. Here he was to receive any British buildings and lands returned by the Spanish from claims by Francisco de Eliza for the Spanish crown. The Spanish commander, Juan Francisco Bodega y Quadra, was very cordial and he and Vancouver exchanged the maps they had made, but no agreement was reached. They decided to await further instructions. At this time, they decided to name the large island on which Nootka was now proven to be located as Quadra and Vancouver Island. Years later, as Spanish influence declined, the name was shortened to simply Vancouver Island. While at Nootka Sound, Vancouver acquired Robert Gray's chart of the lower Columbia River. Gray had entered the river during the summer before sailing to Nootka Sound for repairs. Vancouver realized the importance of verifying Gray's information and conducting a more thorough survey. In October 1792, he sent Lieutenant William Robert Broughton with several boats up the Columbia River. Broughton got as far as the Columbia River Gorge, sighting and naming Mount Hood. Vancouver sailed south along the coast of Spanish Alta California, visiting Chumash villages at Point Conception and near Mission San Buenaventura. Vancouver spent the winter in continuing exploration of the Sandwich Islands, the contemporary islands of Hawaii. Further explorations. The next year, 1793, he returned to British Columbia and proceeded further north, unknowingly missing the overland explorer Alexander Mackenzie by only 48 days. He got to 56 degrees 30 N, having explored north from Point Menzies in Burke Channel to the northwest coast of Prince of Wales Island. He sailed around the latter island, as well as circumnavigating Revillagigedo Island and charting parts of the coasts of Mitkoff, Zarembo, Etolin, Wrangell, Kiyuayu and Kuprianov Islands. With worsening weather, he sailed south to Alta California, hoping to find Bodega y Quadra and fulfill his territorial mission. But the Spaniard was not there. He again spent the winter in the Sandwich Islands. In 1794, he first went to Cook Inlet, the northernmost point of his exploration, and from there followed the coast south. Boat parties charted the east coasts of Chichagof and Baranof Islands, circumnavigated Admiralty Island, explored the head of Lynn Canal, and charted the rest of Kiyuayu Island and nearly all of Kuprianov Island. He then set sail for Great Britain by way of Cape Horn, returning in September 1795, thus completing a circumnavigation of South America. Later life. Impressed by the view from Richmond Hill, Vancouver retired to Petersham, London. Vancouver faced difficulties when he returned home to England. The accomplished and politically well-connected naturalist Archibald Menzies complained that his servant had been pressed into service during a shipboard emergency. Sailing master Joseph Whitby had a competing claim for pay as expedition astronomer, and Thomas Pitt, 2nd Baron Camelford, whom Vancouver had disciplined for numerous infractions and eventually sent home in disgrace, proceeded to harass him publicly and privately. Pitt's allies, including his cousin, Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger, attacked Vancouver in the press. However, Thomas Pitt took a more direct role. On the 29th of August 1796 he sent Vancouver a letter heaping many insults on the head of his former captain, and challenging him to a duel. Vancouver gravely replied that he was unable in a private capacity to answer for his public conduct in his official duty, and offered instead to submit to formal examination by flag officers. Pitt chose instead to stalk Vancouver, ultimately assaulting him on a London street corner. The terms of the subsequent legal dispute required both parties to keep the peace, but nothing stopped Vancouver's civilian brother Charles from interposing and giving Pitt blow after blow until onlookers restrained the attacker. Charges and countercharges flew in the press, with the wealthy Camelford faction having the greater firepower until Vancouver, hailing from his long naval service, died there. Vancouver, one of Britain's greatest explorers and navigators, died in obscurity on the 10th of May 1798 at the age of 40, less than 3 years after completing his voyages and expeditions. No official cause of death was stated, as the medical records pertaining to Vancouver were destroyed. One doctor named John Nish claimed Vancouver died from kidney failure, while others believed it was a hypothyroid condition. His grave is in the churchyard of St. Peter's Church, Petersham, in the London borough of Richmond-upon-Thames, England. The Hudson's Bay Company placed a memorial plaque in the church in 1841. His grave in Portland stone, renovated in the 1960s, is now Grade II listed in view of its historical associations. Legacy. Navigation. Vancouver determined that the Northwest Passage did not exist at the latitudes that had long been suggested. His charts of the North American Northwest coast were so extremely accurate that they served as the key reference for coastal navigation for generations. Robin Fisher, the academic vice president of Mount Royal University in Calgary and author of 2 books on Vancouver, states, he put the Northwest Coast on the map. He drew up a map of the Northwest Coast that was accurate to the 9th degree, to the point it was still being used into the modern day as a navigational aid. That's unusual for a map from that earlier time. However, Vancouver failed to discover 2 of the largest and most important rivers on the Pacific coast, the Fraser River and the Columbia River. He also missed the Skeena River near Prince Rupert in northern British Columbia. Vancouver did eventually learn of the river before he finished his survey, from Robert Gray, captain of the American merchant ship that conducted the first Euro-American sailing of the Columbia River on the 11th of May 1792, after first sighting it on an earlier voyage in 1788. However, it and the Fraser River never made it onto Vancouver's charts. Stephen R. Bone noted in Mercator's World magazine that, how Vancouver could have missed these rivers while accurately charting hundreds of comparatively insignificant inlets, islands, and streams is hard to fathom. What is certain is that his failure to spot the Columbia had great implications for the future political development of the Pacific Northwest. While it is difficult to comprehend how Vancouver missed the Fraser River, much of this river's delta was subject to flooding and summer freshet which prevented the captain from spotting any of its great channels as he sailed the entire shoreline from Point Roberts, Washington to Point Grey in 1792. The Spanish expeditions to the Pacific Northwest, with the 1791 Francisco de Eliza expedition preceding Vancouver by a year, had also missed the Fraser River, although they knew from its muddy plume that there was a major river located nearby. Indigenous peoples. Vancouver generally established a good rapport with both Indigenous peoples and European trappers. Historical records show Vancouver enjoyed good relations with native leaders both in Hawaii, where King Kamehameha I ceded Hawaii to Vancouver in 1794, as well as the Pacific Northwest and California. Vancouver's journals exhibit a high degree of sensitivity to natives. He wrote of meeting the Chumash people, and of his exploration of a small island on the Alaskan coast on which an important burial site was marked by a sepulchre of peculiar character, lined with boards and fragments of military instruments lying near a square box covered with mats. Vancouver states, "This we naturally conjectured contained the remains of some person of consequence, and it much excited the curiosity of some of our party, but as further examination could not possibly have served any useful purpose, and might have given umbrage and pain to the friends of the deceased, should it be the custom to visit the repositories of their dead, I did not think it right that it should be disturbed." Vancouver also displayed contempt in his journals towards unscrupulous Western traders who provided guns to natives by writing, "I am extremely concerned to be compelled to state here that many of the traders from the civilized world have not only pursued a line of conduct diametrically opposite to the true principles of justice in their commercial dealings, but have fomented discords and stirred up contentions between the different tribes in order to increase the demand for these destructive engines. They have been likewise eager to instruct the natives in the use of European arms of all descriptions, and have shown by their own example that they consider gain as the only object of pursuit, and whether this be acquired by fair and honorable means, or otherwise, so long as the advantage is secured, the manner how it is obtained seems to have been, with too many of them, but a very secondary consideration. Robin Fisher notes that Vancouver's relationships with Aboriginal groups were generally peaceful. Indeed, his detailed survey would not have been possible if they had been hostile. While there were hostile incidents at the end of Vancouver's last season, the most serious of which involved a clash with Tlingit Bem Canal in southeast Alaska in 1794, these were the exceptions to Vancouver's exploration of the U.S. and Canadian Northwest coast. Despite a long history of warfare between Britain and Spain, Vancouver maintained excellent relations with his Spanish counterparts and even feted a Spanish sea captain aboard his ship Discovery during his 1792 trip to the Vancouver region. Namesakes ship and cadet units: HMCS Vancouver Halifax-class frigate of the Royal Canadian Navy. TS Vancouver, Australian Navy Cadets. 47 RCSCC Captain Vancouver, Royal Canadian Sea Cadets. Places: many places around the world have been named after George Vancouver, including Australia, Vancouver Peninsula, Cape Vancouver, and Vancouver Breakers in King George Sound, Western Australia. Canada, Mount Vancouver in Yukon and neighboring Alaska, 8th highest mountain in Canada. Vancouver, British Columbia, a major city on the mainland in southwestern British Columbia, the province's largest city. Vancouver Maritime Museum. Vancouver Bay, British Columbia, in Jervis Inlet, east of Powell River, named after Vancouver when Captain George H. Richards resurveyed the area in 1860. Vancouver Island, in British Columbia off the southwest coast of the mainland, North America's largest Pacific island and location of the provincial capital at Victoria on its southern tip. New Zealand, Mount Vancouver, the 4th highest mountain in New Zealand. Vancouver, arm of Breaksea Sound, Fiordland, South Island, United States. Vancouver, Washington, a smaller city in southwestern Washington across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon. Fort Vancouver, a Hudson's Bay Company trading post established in 1825. Memorials statues of Vancouver are located in front of Vancouver City Hall, in Kings Lynn and on top of the dome of the British Columbia Parliament buildings. The Vancouver Quarter Shopping Centre bears his name in his hometown of Kings Lynn, England. British Rail Class 365 Unit 365,514 Captain George Vancouver operates on the route between Kings Lynn and London. Canada Post issued a pair of 14-cent stamps to mark the 200th anniversary of Captain Cook's arrival at Nootka Sound on Vancouver Island on the 26th of April, 1978. George Vancouver was a crewman on this voyage. Gate to the Northwest Passage, a commemorative statue by Vancouver artist Alan Chung Hung, was commissioned by Parks Canada and installed at the mouth of False Creek in Vanier Park near the Vancouver Maritime Museum in 1980. Canada Post issued a 37-cent stamp inscribed "Vancouver explores the coast" on the 17th of March 1988. It was one of a set of 4 stamps issued to honor exploration of Canada. Recognizes the George Vancouver Rose, named in his honor and hybridized by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Virgin Trains British Rail Class 221 Unit 221,129 was named in his honor but has since been denamed on transfer to Cross Country. A commemorative monument is located on the beach in Northwestern Maui, Hawaii, commemorating George Vancouver's contribution of coffee and root vegetables to the islands of Hawaii, inscribed by Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the 2nd of December 1967. Many collections were made on the voyage. One was donated by Archibald Menzies to the British Museum 1796. Another, made by Surgeon George Goodman Hewitt, was donated by A. W. Franks to the British Museum in 1891. An account of these has been published. 250th Birthday Commemorations Canada Post issued a $1.55 postage stamp to commemorate the 250th anniversary of Vancouver's birth, on the 22nd of June 2007. The stamp has an embossed image of Vancouver seen from behind as he gazes forward towards a mountainous coastline. This may be the first Canadian stamp not to show the subject's face. The city of Vancouver in Canada organized a celebration to commemorate the 250th anniversary of Vancouver's birth in June 2007 at the Vancouver Maritime Museum. The one-hour festivities included the presentation of a massive 63 by 114 centimeters carrot cake, the firing of a gun salute by the Royal Canadian Artillery's 15th Field Regiment, and a performance by the Vancouver Firefighters Band. Vancouver's then Mayor, Sam Sullivan, officially declared the 22nd of June 2007 to be George Day. The Musqueam native elder Larry Grant attended the festivities and acknowledged that some of his people might disapprove of his presence, but also noted many people don't feel Aboriginal people should be celebrating this occasion. "I believe it has helped the world, and that's part of who we are. That's the legacy of our people. We're generous to a fault. The legacy is strong and a good one, in the sense that without the First Nations working with the colonials, it wouldn't have been part of Canada to begin with, and Britain would be the poorer for it." Origins of the family name. There has been some debate about the origins of the Vancouver name. It is now commonly accepted that the name Vancouver derives from the expression Van Coevorden, meaning from Coevorden, a city in the northeast of the Netherlands. This city is apparently named after the Coevorden family of the 13th–15th century. In the 16th century, a number of businessmen from the Coevorden area moved to England. Some of them were known as Vancouverden. Others adopted the surname Oxford, as in Oxenfording, which is approximately the English translation of Coevorden. However, it is not the exact name of the noble family mentioned in the history books that claim Vancouver's noble lineage. The name was Coevorden, not Coevorden. In the 1970s, Adrian Mansvelt, a former consul general of the Netherlands based in Vancouver, published a collation of information in both historical and genealogical journals and in the Vancouver Sun newspaper. Mansvelt's theory was later presented by the city during the Expo 86 World's Fair as historical fact. The information was then used by historian W. K. Lamb in his book A Voyage of Discovery to the North Pacific Ocean and Round the World, 1791–1795. W. K. Lamb, in summarizing Mansvelt's 1973 research, observes evidence of close family ties between the Vancouver family of Britain and the Vancouverden family of the Netherlands, as well as George Vancouver's own words from his diaries in referring to his Dutch ancestry. As the name Vancouver suggests, the Vancouvers were of Dutch origin. They were descended from the titled Vancouverden family, one of the oldest in the Netherlands, by the 12th century, and for many years thereafter, their castle at Coevorden, in the province of Drenthe, was an important fortress on the eastern frontier. George Vancouver was aware of this. In July 1794, he named the Lynn Canal after the place of my nativity, and Point Coevorden after the seat of my ancestors. Vancouver's great-grandfather, Raint Walter Vancouverden, was probably the first of the line to establish an English connection. While serving as a squire at one of the German courts, he met Johanna Lilingston, an English girl who was one of the ladies-in-waiting. They were married in 1699. The son, Lucas Hendrik Vancouverden, married Vancouver's grandmother, Sarah. In his later years he probably anglicised his name and spent most of his time in England. By the 18th century, the estates of the Vancouverdens were mostly in the province of Overijssel, and some of the family were living in Valenhove on the Zuiderzee. The English and Dutch branches kept in touch, and in 1798 George Vancouver's brother Charles would marry a kinswoman, Louise Josephine Vancouverden, of Valenhove. Both were great-grandchildren of Raint Walter Vancouverden. Quote, in 2006, John Robson, a librarian at the University of Waikato, conducted his own research into George Vancouver's ancestry, which he published in an article published in the British Columbia History Journal. Robson theorizes that Vancouver's forebears may have been Flemish rather than Dutch. He believes that Vancouver is descended from the Vangover family of Ipswich and Colchester in Suffolk. Those towns had a significant Flemish population in the 16th and 17th centuries. George Vancouver named the south point of what is now Coevorden Island, Alaska, as Point Coevorden during his exploration of the North American Pacific coast, in honor of his family's hometown of Coevorden. It is located at the western point of entry to Lynn Canal in southeastern Alaska. Works by George Vancouver. The Admiralty instructed Vancouver to publish a narrative of his voyage, which he started to write in early 1796 in Petersham. At the time of his death, the manuscript covered the period up to mid-1795. The work, A Voyage of Discovery to the North Pacific Ocean, and Round the World, was completed by his brother John and published in 3 volumes in the autumn of 1798. A second edition was published in 1801 in 6 volumes. Volume 1, Google Books. Volume 1, Internet Archive. Volume 1. Volume 2, Google Books. Volume 2, Internet Archive. Volume 2. Volume 3, Google Books. Volume 3, Internet Archive. Volume 3. A modern annotated edition by W. K. Lamb was renamed The Voyage of George Vancouver 1791–1795, and published in 4 volumes by the Hakluyt Society of London, England.